There was the day during our first trip, our first circle of paradise, when in order to enjoy my phantasms of peace, I firmly decided to ignore what I could not help perceiving. The fact that I was to her not a boyfriend, not a glamour man, not a pal, not even a person at all, but just 2 eyes and a foot of engorged brawn, to mention only mentionable matters. There was the day when, having withdrawn the functional promise I had made her on the eve, whatever she had set her funny little heart on, a roller rink with some special plastic floor, or a movie matinee to which she wanted to go alone, I happened to glimpse from the bathroom, through a chance combination of mirror aslant and door ajar, a look on her face. That look I cannot exactly describe, an expression of helplessness so perfect that it seemed to grade into one of rather comfortable inanity, just because this was the very limit of injustice and frustration. And every limit presupposes something beyond it, hence the neutral illumination. And when you bear in mind that these were the raised eyebrows and parted lips of a child, you may better appreciate what depths of calculated carnality, what reflected despair restrained me from falling at her dear feet and dissolving in human tears, and sacrificing my jealousy to whatever pleasure Lolita might hope to derive from mixing with dirty and dangerous children in an outside world that was real to her. And I have still other smothered memories, now unfolding themselves into limbless monsters of pain. Once, in a sunset-ending street of Beardsley, she turned to little Eva Rosen. I was taking both nymphets to a concert and walking behind them so close as almost to touch them with my person. She turned to Eva, and so very serenely and seriously, in answer to something the other had said about its being better to die than hear Milton Pinsky, some local schoolboy she knew, talk about music, my Lolita remarked, "You know, what's so dreadful about dying is you are completely on your own." And it struck me, as my automaton knees went up and down, that I simply did not know a thing about my darling's mind, and that quite possibly, behind the awful juvenile clichés, there was in her a garden and a twilight, and a palace gate, dim and adorable regions which happened to be lucidly and absolutely forbidden to me, in my polluted rags and miserable convulsions. For I often noticed that, living as we did, she and I, in a world of total evil, we would become strangely embarrassed whenever I tried to discuss something she and an older friend, she and a parent, she and a really healthy sweetheart, I and Annabel, Lolita and a sublime, purified, analyzed, deified Harold Hayes might have discussed. An abstract idea, a painting, stippled Hopkins or Sean Baudelaire, God or Shakespeare, anything of a genuine kind. Goodwill. She would mail her vulnerability in trite brashness and boredom, whereas I, using for my desperately detached comments an artificial tone of voice that set my own last teeth on edge, provoked my audience to such outbursts of rudeness as made any further conversation impossible. Oh, my poor bruised child. I loved you. I was a pentapot monster, but I loved you. I was despicable and brutal and turpid and everything. Mais je t'aimais. And there were times when I knew how you felt, and it was hell to know it, my little one. Lolita girl, brave Dolly Schiller. I recall certain moments, let us call them icebergs in paradise, when, having had my fill of her, after fabulous, insane exertions that left me limp and azure-barred, I would gather her in my arms with, at last, a mute moan of human tenderness, her skin glistening in the neon light coming from the paved court through the slits in the blind, her soot-black lashes matted, her grave grey eyes more vacant than ever, for all the world a little patient still in the confusion of a drug after a major operation. And the tenderness would deepen to shame and despair, and I would lull and rock my lone light Lolita in my marble arms, and moan in her warm hair, and caress her at random, and mutely ask her blessing, and at the peak of this human, agonized, selfless tenderness, with my soul actually hanging around her naked body and ready to repent, all at once, ironically, horribly, lust would swell again, and, "Oh no," Lolita would say with a sigh to heaven, and the next moment the tenderness and the azure, all would be shattered. Mid-20th century ideas concerning child-parent relationship have been considerably tainted by the scholastic rigmarole and standardized symbols of the psychoanalytic racket. But I hope I am addressing myself to unbiased readers. Once, when Avis's father had honked outside to signal Papa had come to take his pet home, I felt obliged to invite him into the parlour. And he sat down for a minute, and while we conversed, Avis, a heavy, unattractive, affectionate child, drew up to him and eventually perched plumply on his knee. Now, I do not remember if I have mentioned that Lolita always had an absolutely enchanting smile for strangers, a tender, furry slitting of the eyes, a dreamy, sweet radiance of all her features, which did not mean a thing, of course, but was so beautiful, so endearing, that one found it hard to reduce such sweetness to but a magic gene, automatically lighting up her face in atavistic token of some ancient rite of welcome. Hospitable prostitution, the coarse reader may say.